to a special edition of the Business Chronicles, where we have a discussion panel on the national budget 2025-2026. I am Shafinaz Muluturam Ghulam, Head of Advisory at Rogers Capital Tax, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. We stand at an important moment in the Mauritius economic journey. The national budget was presented yesterday in the National Assembly. The theme of the budget is From Abyss to Prosperity, Reconstructing the Bridge to the Future, which is about reconstructing the economy, strengthening the country's finances, and restoring the strong fabrics of the nation. We are here today to discuss whether this national budget is hopefully a roadmap to enhance economic stability and growth. In December 2024, the newly elected government, has released the State of the Economy report, which actually showed a bleak picture of the country's finances. And this was again restated in the national budget yesterday. This audit has revealed significant discrepancies in previously reported economic data, including GDP, public debt, and the budget deficit. So, to address these economic challenges, the national budget outlines significant strategies around three pillars, which would be economic renewal, a new social order, and fiscal consolidation. So to delve further on the measures announced in the national budget and the broader implications, I'm pleased to introduce to you our panel. So first of all, we have Faraz Rojid. He is the CEO of Mauritius Finance. He has held leadership roles within key economic institutions and has represented Mauritius in global forums and negotiations related to financial services, economic development, and trade promotion. He has extensive experience developing national strategies to position Mauritius as a trusted IFC. Next, we have Manisha Dukoni. She is the CEO of Theramon Capital Partners and an accomplished economist with a master's in public administration from Harvard University. She is the chairperson of African Leadership Support Facility. She is also a co-founder of the Women in Finance and Investment Association of Mauritius and a special advisor to Women in Finance Rwanda. We have next Joanne Haig, who is the founder and managing director of CMS Prism. She is qualified as a barrister at law in Mauritius and a solicitor in England and Wales. She has been recognized by Chambers Global 2024 as a highly regarded practitioner in corporate commercial law in Mauritius. Next, we have Sanjay Matadin, who is an economist with over 25 years of work experience as a senior academic, policy specialist in international trade, SME development, and capacity building. He has extensive experience working with government agencies in supporting and industrial development and is currently working as a senior lecturer at Middlesex University. And at last, but certainly not least, we have Kabir Ruhi, who is our CEO of Rogers Capital. With a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades, Kabir brings extensive expertise in business leadership, technology transformation, management consulting, and financial services. Recognized as one of Africa's rising leaders by the Institut Choiseul in Paris, he is also an active member of the Young Presidents Organization. Kabir currently serves as the honorary consul of the Republic of Lithuania in Mauritius. So thank you to our panelists for joining us today. In order to set the scene, we will start first of all with Sanjay. Okay. In the budget, they have talked about a new economic model. So when they are talking about the new economic model, they are talking about investment in R&D, higher productivity, transformative investment, updated trade strategies, smart investment in productive infrastructure. So how would they be able to achieve higher level of economic growth?
Thank you, Safinaz. Thank you, Rogers Capital, for inviting me. So before I dwell to the question that you've asked me, I think it's important to set the context in which this budget has been presented. I will look at it from 3 fronts. The first front, if we look at the international level, we see that the trade war and the tariff war that is happening between the West, principally America and China, and which has now gone worldwide, will be affecting the world economy, the American economy, and Europe, and the world economy, and there's a risk of global recession. The second front would be what I will call the national front in Mauritius. You said it rightly. We are facing a situation of rising debt. Okay, the government said it will amount to 90% of GDP, and I was really shocked to hear that the budget deficit will now reach on 9.8%, if I'm correct, of the GDP. While we know, as any economist will know, that the benchmark for a budget deficit should be around 3%.
Exactly.
So from 3% to 9.8%, it is really very aggravating. So on the third front, I think there are the bread and butter issues of the population. So we also have to look at it from the population, the policies made by the new government, the expectations that the population had in terms of policies, the 14th month of bonus, the free transport, and all that. So keeping all that in mind, I think the job of the government was not really an easy one. And there was it was important to move from the previous kind of economic model, which was based mainly on consumption. And we know that to build that model, it relied on a number of factors. In fact, you would give allocation to the public, and then this will increase in terms of you will have to increase taxes. I mean, to give, you have to get money from the public first. So that will mean that if you want to give more, you will have to, at some point in time, get it back from the population, because the government doesn't have money of its own. Okay, so what it does is to make the system work, you will have to go through a spiral, or what we call a wage spiral inflation. I mean, you will give more, then prices will go up, workers will ask for more wages, so it was not sustainable. And at some point in time, this led to this explosion of the budget deficit, and also the trade deficit. You will realize that in Mauritius, the exports are almost 3 times less than the imports. Okay?
Yes.
On that basis, I think the government had to take serious measures. And I think if we read on point 8 of the budget, and I would like to just read what was said there, because it's quite interesting. It says that, we cannot keep on the way we're doing things. We need to take action. And I think this is the philosophy of the budget. We saw some measures, some starting kind of measures, some starting reforms, some maybe these will, will be the first budget of the government, and we know that for the first budget of any government, they would like to take measures which are a bit difficult. Maybe at the end of the mandate, they will relax it. So I think that set up the context of where we are in terms of the presentation of this budget. Now, to come back to your question, we'll see that a lot of emphasis, I think first of all, it was important to set the foundation right, so that we can build on that foundation. And we'll see that the government has, I think in the first paragraph of the budget itself, the government is saying that they will put a lot of emphasis on AI, on smart investment. And this is also something which is taking the world by storm. You will know that if we miss the train on AI, it will be very difficult for us to catch up in terms of our comparative advantage, about our competitiveness, and our kind of how we're going to do business and do more exports. Okay? So I think there are a lot of measures in terms of AI coming into different sectors of the economy. When we read the budget, the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance, said that there would be an AI department in different ministries, and this will help to bring in the new kind of technology and the new kind of way of doing things. And I think it's important. I think when we look at the audit report, and I was reading the audit report, and it said that Mauritius had, for example, an e-commerce strategy. We had an AI strategy, but because of lack of maybe political commitment, and maybe also because of COVID, we have to realize that the COVID had an impact for at least 2 years on the economy of Mauritius. There was a time lag, and it was highlighted that the e-commerce strategy has not been implemented, and we are going to lag behind. So it was important. But here, I think that the budget, in terms of what could be said as a constructive criticism, because we can't just say that everything is rosy, I think it doesn't say specifically how it's going to do it.
I was about to
And
ask that.
also,
Yes.
who's going to drive it?
Exactly.
And also the absorption capacity of the government of Mauritius. Because to have big dreams, to have big plans is good, but can you put it, can you implement it, is the question. So on that
Okay.
front, I think we need to wait for the government to elaborate more. And also, I think one of the pressing problem of this government is that many posts in the government are vacant, and many of the institutions are not working properly because they don't have the manpower, they don't have the leadership. So how fast the government can make the recruitment and make the changes is important, because at the end of the day, I think Mauritius, to grow to the next level, it needs more efficiency, it needs more digitalization. We need to move more toward a smart Mauritius. I think I will stop here. Maybe
Yes.
If you have follow-up questions, and I can.
No, I think you are right, definitely. But definitely the right person at the right place, of course. And AI is not something that will be able to implement so easily. I think we need experts. We need people who would be able to guide us through all of these. And I think when we talk about those strategies, it is not that clear. We will need to wait for further guidance, of course. But when we talk about all the investment and everything that we plan to do, it seems very long term, right? And in the short term, we still have, as I have said in the introduction, we have an unsustainable public debt. We have a huge trade deficit, as Sanjay has mentioned as well. And so what we are trying to do is trying to build a resilient economy. And from the budget, I think we will need to await for the finance bill, but we haven't seen details regarding the implementations, the measures. So when we are talking about boosting revenue, fiscal consolidation, and of course, reducing expenditure as well, while we are not burdening the vulnerable. So my question to Kabi what is your take on this? Would that be helpful? Would that be able to reach the aim of the government that they are trying to reach a target of 75% of debt to GDP ratio? Would that be feasible?
Well, at the outset, I think we need to qualify what sustainable levels of debt actually mean. I think there is broad consensus that a ceiling of roughly 60% of debt to GDP is within prudential norms, right? No wonder that up till, I think, 2020, this threshold was hard-coded in legislation. And as you are painfully aware, we are nowhere near that threshold. I think your question was about reaching that target in 3 years' time.
In 3 years' time, yes.
The answer to the question, as it seems, is no. If you look at the annexures to the budget, I think from what I remember, we are targeting to reach a threshold of 79.7%, just
Okay. Yeah.
slightly below 80% in 3 years' time. I mean, all things being equal, and I shouldn't say that on the basis of, a volatile global environment, it'll probably take us, but never mind, it'll probably take us an extra 1 or 2 years to reach 75%.
Okay.
I mean, that said, the trajectory is as important as the target itself. And when it comes to revenue, clear measures have been announced, including the introduction of the fair share contribution,
Yes.
the temporary fair share contribution. I think one needs to be wary about the permanence of temporary tax measures.
When tax commitments to stay.
But as a result, from what I've read, the government is expecting a significant increase in revenue next year of around 23%, 11% in the following one, and then it would stabilize and normalize around 6%.
Okay.
I think the challenge is more related to the expenditure side of things. Though there is the staggered delay in BRP eligibility, social benefits in our country remain largely untargeted. And year on year, we see significant resource wastage. The Prime Minister has announced a 5 billion rupee efficiency saving over 3 years. That would equate to less than 1.7 billion per annum, which in next year's GDP would represent only 25 basis points. I think we should be much more ambitious about this, especially that we, when we read the Director of Audit's report year on year, there is probably some leeway to do more. That said, I'm always a proponent of the under-promise and over-deliver philosophy, especially when it comes to public finance management.
Yes. And I think when we talk about the efficient use of resources, I think there's accountability in that sense, because sometimes in many of those funds, we do not really know for sure how the money is being used. Like we have the climate responsibility levy, and we haven't seen now whether how much we will gather from that. So we will have to know how it is being used. And there are a lot of sustainable projects during the budget. So hopefully this fund will be used for these kinds of projects. And of course, like you were saying, we need to make sure that there is a proper use of the resources. So if we take from an economy perspective, can we go sector-based? Where my next question will be to Faraz. Given that we have the financial services sector, which is one of the pillars of our economy, and the national budget is talking about building a resilient banking and financial services sector with focus on new areas of growth and new market. We are talking about buoyant banking, a dedicated licensing framework for wealth management and family offices. We are talking about a new legislation for electronic bills of exchange and trade documents. And they are talking about a new Africa strategy, although we haven't seen details regarding the new Africa strategy, but there is something coming for the financial services sector to reinforce Mauritius' role as an IFC as Africa-bound investment, for Africa-bound investments. So, but we haven't seen a lot of exemptions, tax exemptions for investment and incentives to boost Mauritius as an IFC. What is your take on this?
I think, Safinaz, I think the narrative has changed. If were to be candid, I think the narrative has changed from tax exemptions and tax incentives to more value-added services that would perhaps trigger tax incentives in the aftermath of those activities. But your question is more threefold. So let's talk about new products. I think the budget has come up, the Minister of Finance has come up with a couple of new products, including bullion banking and exchange. Family offices, I think, is very important. It's in the narrative of Mauritius being a private wealth hub. I think we have not done enough to position Mauritius in the private wealth realm. If you look at the value of Mauritius as a financial center, you would see that it's quite twofold. So you have corporate, including structuring and funds, and then you have the private wealth management. So there is a lot of unique selling points for Mauritius to be a private wealth hub. But we have not reached there, whether it is in terms of more substantive activities, whether it is in terms of the positioning of the country, the marketing of the country for private wealth.
Yeah.
So I think the introduction of the reintroduction of the wealth management license coupled with family offices, which currently the framework for family offices, especially single family offices, is not really, it's not really working, right? If you look at it, fear of me going into details, but nitty-gritties like having MLROs and compliance officers for single family offices doesn't really make sense. So I think they should be addressed, but it's in the scheme of things. Multi-family offices, I think if you look at it, we will always have the ability to attract the tier 2 and tier 3, so high net worth individuals and net worth individuals, so exceptionally affluent, having investable income, let's say 500K or more in terms of dollars, would be something that would be interesting. So I think that license would broaden the appetite of exceptionally affluent non-citizens to use Mauritius to park their wealth, to grow their wealth, amongst others. There's one more interesting thing that was announced in the budget is the financial sector assessment program, which will be done with the Bretton Woods institution. I think that's really important because that would really future-proof Mauritius, be it for structuring, be it for fund, be it for private wealth. So I think that is very important. So remains always, it's the implementation that matters. So we have to await the impact assessment,
Yes.
and then what would come out of it, whether it is with blueprint, whether it is with roadmap. So that is something that is very important in terms of new products and new services that the jurisdiction will have the ability to offer. At the same time, you've asked me about the Africa strategy. I will be a bit bold. If you look at our Africa strategy right now, especially services-bound Africa strategy, tourism account for a small chunk of it. Healthcare, so consumption in Mauritius in terms of services would account for a bit of it. Education, I think we have had very tall orders, but we have not gotten there in terms of being the education hub for Africa, like Malaysia and Singapore is for the ASEAN countries. So I think our Africa strategy rests squarely on the value that we add as a financial center. There are a number of things that we need to continue getting right, whether they are the expansion of our risk mitigation treaties, so bilateral investment treaties, whether they are the tax treaties. So we need to have them. Over and above that, a very conducive business environment, coupled with the ability of the service providers in Mauritius to service the African clientele. So I'm not only talking about corporate service providers like management companies, but also family offices, trusteeship services, and banking. It's very important. We have to walk the talk. So I think the government is right to put a lot of emphasis on our Africa strategy for financial services. But as you know, Africa is the land of the next El Dorado, the next frontier of growth, but we have not reached there. So that should not be done at the expense of, for instance, our India market. If you look at funds, for instance, the ticket sizes in India is much more than going in Africa. So we have to be very mindful of that, but we can always grow our Africa share of activities, and it's about getting the ingredients right. And I think the budget gives an indication of that. In terms of tax incentives, like I mentioned in my opening sentence, I think the narrative has changed, but there has been an extension of the partial exemption regime for virtual assets. I think that is important. Over and above that, you will have seen in the details in the fine print that there would be the introduction of the qualified domestic minimum
Exactly.
top-up tax.
Yeah.
So the QDMTT will come, it's very important that it comes with a package of incentives, including recalibration of our partial exemption regime. So I think once it will be implemented for qualifying entities, it is very important that we recalibrate all the tax incentives that we have. And of course, we have to be mindful that we have to be compliant with the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices and the EU's Code of Governance, amongst others. So I think the tax incentives will come in the aftermath of the QDMTT, but we will have to bear those in mind going forward.
Yes. And so what you're saying is, in fact, that although we already have some tax incentives which are already in place for family office, single, multiple, there are some tax exemptions already that we have. So we are not having additional tax exemptions, not for now at least, but we are talking more about value-added services. We are talking more about non-tax benefits and why people should be coming to Mauritius to invest and to have these kind of wealth management activities in Mauritius. And definitely, if we're talking about the New Africa strategy, we should be bringing the people in the industry for their input, because they would be the people who work closely with clients and would be aware of what is going on and how to bring about the Africa strategy.
Yeah, definitely.
But when we talk about an IFC, like Mauritius being a leading global business and financial hub, one thing which would be important is keeping our rupee stable. And so given these challenges that we've been having, depreciation of the rupee, we do not have enough reserves of foreign currency. So what immediate measures are necessary to stabilize the rupee and ensure that there is a steady supply of foreign currency to support importers and investor confidence? This question would be for Kabir.
Well, whether we position as an IFC, a leading IFC or not, we need a stable rupee.
Yes.
We need a stable local currency. And I think that, we need to rendre à César ce qui appartient à César. The rupee has been stabilized within months. It is stable, and we hope that this trend will continue. When it comes to headline inflation, it is very well contained as well. Anything between 2.5 to 3.5% is good. Core inflation is slightly elevated, but there's nothing sinister about it. As regards forex availability, I'm afraid this will take a bit of time. The more so that I'm given to understand that there is currently a backlog of 500 to 600 million USD in the system. And as any backlog, it will take time. I think government has been very clear in terms of measures that would significantly reduce leakage, as well as trade and current account deficits. We now need to focus on two things. Number one, we obviously need to attract foreign investments. which for way too long had been concentrated into, let's say, low productivity, low multiplier property development. And secondly, we need to boost the performance of our export base, right? And this one is not a mince affair for two reasons. Number one, probably we've seen our value proposition diluted over time, and combined to that, we have also, suffered from a drastic erosion of competitiveness.
Exactly.
So that would be my short answer to your question, which would probably require much more time.
I think so too. In fact, we have been in an economy of where we have been importing so much and consuming so much. I think it will take a long time for us to become more of sustainable as an economy, to produce more and to be able to be competitive in the international market, to be able to export. That's something that we should.
I mean, right now, we got to be careful on if we're minded to sort of drastically reduce consumption, obviously it will have an adverse impact on GDP. What we should really aim at is to really, boosting that last component of net exports, which, by the way, I think you spoke about that, is negative right now. So it's not only it's not contributing, but it's actually draining GDP. For way too long, our economy has overly relied on consumption, and till up to recently, government spending. So it is high time that we go back to the model that contributed to our relative success, which is about investments, especially foreign investments and exports.
And talking about investment in the different sectors, then my next question would be for Manisha, because as Kabir is saying, we need to be able to invest in various sectors. We are talking about the different kind of production. I think in the budget they have also talked about sugarcane, and they have been talking about consolidating the existing pillars of our economy, and the existing pillars will be all the sectors which were before very profitable, and whether we are investing enough in those sectors. And we have seen that they are talking about tourism some more, and there is a budget allocated to tourism, which is I'm not saying it's enough, but I think it's more than before, where we are talking now about sustainable and inclusive tourism. We are talking about quality and value-added tourism in the likes of Seychelles or Maldives. And they are talking about branding and positioning Mauritius and environment-friendly, of course, environment-friendly tourism. And we also have a tourist fee that will be implemented of €3 per tourist per night. This is not something which is uncommon. It happens in many countries which are tourist destinations. And as I have said, they talked about the agricultural sector, they talked about the blue economy. So what are your views about the future of those sectors in light of all the challenges, and whether there is opportunity to grow these sectors? And what other sectors do you think that we should look into?
I think, first of all, to follow up on what Kabir just mentioned, this budget is a stark change in terms of trajectory. So we're moving away from a consumption-based economy to an investment-led economy. And this is something that many economists, including myself, we've been kind of harping for a very long time, that we need to have more emphasis on investments. Now, having said that, driving, given some of the core structural issues within Mauritius, we have a small population, we have a declining population as well. We also have got, we're far from most of the market, so it's extremely costly, we're not so competitive. And therefore, all these, when you take all these components together, that means that even driving this investment-led economy is something that's going to be very difficult. In fact, when you look at the projections within the 3 to 4 years, we're aiming at about 4.5% growth. So even, I think the government is cognizant of the fact that we need that trajectory, but it's not something that's going to give us immediately like a 10% growth. And also, sectors in Mauritius have been invented already. So therefore, there is a question of more consolidating those existing sectors. And you rightly mentioned the tourism sector. As maybe you would know, the tourism arrival in the first 3 months of this year were much lower than what we had last year. In April, it picked up because of Easter holidays, but we don't know how things are moving. Mauritius is far away from most markets. We're highly dependent on European market and in particular French market. So therefore, there is a whole rethinking that needs to be done. And those rethinking, that means that we need to reorganize certainly the sector. But apart from the sector, there is also the blue economy sector. One of the things I think some of you have mentioned, Sanjay, you mentioned the fact that, for example, we're exporting very little compared to what we're importing. One of our biggest import after petroleum products is actually fish products. And we are surrounded by the sea, and we have one of the biggest economic zone, or well, exclusive economic zone for in terms of the sea. So which means that there are some disconsonants in terms of our production and production capacity. Therefore, if you look at the budget, there is quite a bit that is being put in place with respect to the blue economy. Of course, I think that it's also it's a budget speech of blueprints. So there's going to be a few more blueprints and roadmap, but that is a good thing in the sense that the way we are, the way our economy has evolved, it's very difficult to just invent something in a budget. And the budget is not the instrument to invent a new sector. And the complexity of those sectors has to go in a blueprint, in a strategy, in a more focused idea. So the blue economy is one of those sectors. The third sector that, as an overall cross-cutting sector, is really that question of innovation. And if we look at our level of development in Mauritius, the amount of innovation, research and innovation is very low compared to countries with similar level of GDP. So being able to drive more of research, more of development, more of innovation within the country, it's something that will likely yield more results in the longer term.
Yeah.
Now, linked to that, there's one element that I haven't heard in the budget, is the biopharmaceutical sector.
Okay.
It's one of those sectors for me where I feel Mauritius has a huge leverage, and there are things that certainly can
That
be
could be
done in there, but it's not explicit in there. In fact, there is maybe the MIBL is being integrated within the EDB. Maybe that will create a more comprehensive ground for implementation of the framework for the biopharmaceutical sector. And that lastly, in terms of the different sectors, I would say that agribusiness. And being able to support the food security of Mauritius. We are a small island. We are also a net food importer. And there are many things that could be produced here locally, but we are, maybe for commercial reasons, we're importing those products. Therefore, it certainly makes sense to put support to that. But that's not new. Many other governments before have tried to put things in place. So I would say here on this particular aspect that the implementation is going to be very important. Having said that, all these sectors, they rest on something that is fundamental, which is the energy production. This year, actually, earlier this year, we reached our peak production capacity. In the 80s and 90s, one of the reasons why we have been able to drive industrialization, and if we want to drive further industrialization, we need to invest in new capacity for energy generation. And renewable energy alone is not going to help us. Therefore, there are some cross-cutting elements that will have to be put in place, and that means investments. One of the other things that I haven't really seen is whether there's going to be PPPs or whether it is the government itself that's going to be investing in the projects that are being announced. So there are things that are there. It's very ambitious. Implementing those is what is going to be the biggest challenge, I would say, because currently, if we look at the past records, 15, 20 years, implementation capacity has not been the best.
Yeah. And that would be if we are talking about retaining talent or attracting talent to Mauritius, which could help us to grow. And if we are talking about industrialization, we are talking about growing these sectors, would that help in that case?
Absolutely. If we're talking about talent, so one of the key, looking at the feeder stock for talent, the focus is to double the number of international students in the country. That is likely going to be a feeder stock for, we're here, for example, you could be recruiting more of those students who are, who come out of the universities or training institutions from Mauritius. But retaining talent is a big thing because you have to be very attractive. And as we've seen, whether in the financial services sector, in the tourism sector, or elsewhere, Mauritian talent is very well demanded outside. And therefore, Mauritian companies have a hard job too. And Kabir sitting here knows very well how hard it is, I guess, to retain local talent.
I've got my pretty looks.
That works.
Thank you, Manisha. I think national budget, we will have to talk about fiscal measures, of course. So I will come to you, Joanne. We have seen many changes from a fiscal perspective, from a tax perspective, and mostly aimed to boost revenue, and such as the fair share contribution on corporates and individuals, and for chargeable income. For corporates, it's chargeable income above 24 million, and banks on their domestic operations. And we have the reintroduction of the alternative minimum tax on highly profitable sectors like the real estate. So what will be the impact of those measures?
I think, how do we come back from the abyss, I think is the undercurrent of the whole speech. And I have to say, give credit where credit is due. I appreciated the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister's candor by saying that prosperity cannot happen overnight. And I guess that's why they called it fair share contribution. Everyone needs to help rebuild the economy. I think we've had subliminal messaging since December of last year through the, first of all, for the report State of the Economy, just to make people realize just how dire things were. And with that in mind, just to it didn't come as a huge surprise, the tax hikes. To be completely honest, I expected worse. So I was actually pleasantly surprised by the level of, by the balancing act that happened with the fiscal measures. I think that where there was a balancing exercise to be done between making sure those who were at the bottom of the ladder weren't hit, and indeed with the simplification of the tax bands, some people will actually come out of the income tax net completely. Also making sure that people within the middle income sector were not unduly affected. And this is what we saw a few years ago with the introduction of the infamous solidarity levy, where actually these were the people who were the hardest hit. So with that in mind, the measures announced actually make sense to me. So what they've done is they've gone for the deep pockets and they've gone for the high net worth and ultra high net worth. So it didn't come as a huge surprise that they went for banks and highly profitable sectors such as hotels, financial intermediation, insurance companies, real estate activities. There are a few things that I think is worth highlighting, which are positive, but there's also some caution that needs to be exercised. First of all, they've been very careful about carving out the global business companies and companies that have tax holidays and tax exemptions. I think that's quite neat and clever, but sometimes we shouldn't try to be too clever. It's been conveniently put in the Value-Added Tax Act, so we'll can draw your own conclusions for that. So they've tried to protect that industry. And again, we saw some lessons learned from the infamous solidarity levy. The second point I wanted to highlight is that there is, and as Kabir mentioned, we have to be careful about the permanence of temporary tax measures. There is a sunset clause, and that was one of the criticisms of the solidarity levy as well. We had no visibility of how long it would last. They said 3 years. We also say that there are two things that are certain in life, death, and taxes. Let's hope that this isn't forever. But the message is very much, let's rebuild, let's recover.
Yeah.
Give your fair share, contribute to rebuilding the economy, and then we'll remove the taxes, but we'll see whether they achieve that aim. One word of caution, though, we have to be careful not to, in our zeal to try to rebalance the economy and collect tax from people who have the means to do so, not to limit the ability to attract high net worth individuals when we're trying to build industries such as the wealth management industry and family offices. When you're setting a threshold of 12 million a year for individuals, it might seem very high for the everyday Mauritian, but for an expat who's been working at a bank or family office in Europe or Switzerland or Dubai, it's actually not that much money. So we have to be careful at balancing that act. I was also quite surprised that there's this sort of concept of capital gains now when we talk about villas and EDB schemes, properties that people are buying. So that might act as a deterrent. It's the higher of 10% of the value of the property or 30% of the capital gain. So we have to be careful about how we are marketing the jurisdiction. On the one hand, we're saying, please come to Mauritius, please invest in Mauritius, please bring your foreign currency. But on the other hand, are we now saying that there's capital gains? So it is a difficult exercise. As I've said, I expected much worse, but we still have to be careful that whatever measures are being put on are in line and complementary to the other sectors and industry we're trying to boost as well.
Okay. And hopefully these would be temporary measures. Hopefully.
One can hope.
Because I think when you talked about the exclusion of the global companies, I think there has been so many people not agreeing to the CCR levy being applicable to offshore companies where the tax rate has increased. I think it would have been difficult for the government to impose like higher rates of taxes on the global business again.
Correct.
But the way they are doing it, I think we will need to discuss about this
yes, indeed.
in another forum.
Correct.
Yeah. In fact, I will come back to you, Joanne. I have a few more tax questions. But before I move to you, given that we will be short in time, I just move to Manisha for just a few comments because we talked about the high income earners. If we can just talk about a little bit about the SMEs, because we have heard a lot about the SMEs and incentives for them. If you can just run very briefly on that, please.
I think, first of all, what is important for us to understand is SMEs carry about a third of the workforce of Mauritius, and therefore they are a force to be reckoned with. And in SMEs, there's the M of SMEs. The medium-sized companies within the SME sector are a lot of the exporters, whether it is your noodle export that goes around the world, across Africa, that has reached, that has really done a good Africa strategy, whether it is some of the smaller, maybe, like detergent producers that are exporting under the COMESA agreements, etc. They are very important, and therefore there is, as we say, peut-être la part belle that is being done, that is being shared with them. Now, having said that, when we look previously at the incentives, most of the incentives were really skewed towards, and I think Kabir mentioned that, were very skewed towards the construction sector, real estate and construction.
Yeah.
Here we see a bit of a rebalancing. And this rebalancing is in the form of different types of support, subsidies, and help, really help towards going to market, etc. For women entrepreneurs. Many of them have been helped via, for example, the She Trade movement. We've seen many of the associations of women in Mauritius that have done quite a lot of work to help women. You've seen IMFCE, etc. Have done quite a lot to help women. Even the chamber, MCCI, has been working on putting in future platforms, for example, to help women and women entrepreneurs. This is one big chunk. And in fact, when we're thinking about women entrepreneurs, very often in our kind of mindset, we think about the local person who's selling pickles or dresses. It's much more complex and complicated.
Exactly.
And a lot of the women entrepreneurs are also in the services sector, including in financial services, where when we're looking at the whole ecosystem of the financial services sector, a lot of them are women entrepreneurs. That's one big chunk. The second big chunk, and in fact, when we look at the budget, the Prime Minister speaks about women very early on in the budget, because that's very much in the support for women.
Yes.
The second thing is about youth, and that is they link it with the innovation aspect. And bringing in new suggestions, etc. for that. And if you look at the annexes, there are now new laws that have been put in to ensure that when there are bigger projects,
Yes.
a certain percentage of that big project or a certain amount of that big project goes to an SME-related company.
Of course.
Whether it is, like in the construction sector, for example, it could be, and even government projects could be.
Yes.
So
that is a good thing. Yeah.
these are good things because it kind of opens the market for, the marketplace in some way, for the SMEs to be able to expand, develop.
Exactly.
And I believe that the SMEs would be in the longer term become a driving force, like in many other countries where we see SMEs being driving force in the economy.
Of course. Thank you, Manisha. I will go back to Joanne because we have a few questions that mainly from our clients and our viewers regarding the reactionary amendments to the law based on cases that we have seen in Mauritius. So first of all, the LTO case, you have won the LTO case at the level of the Supreme Court, and now we have seen an amendment, a suggested amendment in the law, where income deemed as core, only income deemed as core would be eligible to the partial exemption. So first of all, I just want to have your quick reaction on that. And secondly, given that the MRA has appealed to the Privy Council for the LTO case, do you think it will weaken their case in that sense? Because they need to amend the law now to clarify.
First of all, I think it's I promise to be nice, but I have to say, I think it's very cheeky to amend the law every time you lose a case. You're going to be amending the law a lot of times otherwise. It's a difficult one because, as you know, I feel very strongly about the case. This case is a situation where a domestic company with all its operations in Mauritius, all its offices in Mauritius, all its activities in Mauritius has been denied the partial exemption, which is ironic because the whole point of BEPS is to tax where value is created.
Exactly.
You know, it's a difficult one for me to get on board with. So I think there's a few options. Either they amend the law and they withdraw the case, or they decide to amend the law and go forward with the case, or they amend the law retroactively, which we have seen in the previous government, which I hope will not happen
Hopefully,
in
not
this time round. So yeah, I think we should look at things from a long-term perspective and look at, yes, if we do not want to tax people, if we want to tax people now on interest income, then so be it. There needs to be a policy decision.
Exactly.
But simply amending the law because one has lost a case is not a solution in my humble view.
But then in the same sense, we have the issue of VAT rulings, where in fact, usually an income tax ruling is not binding, but a VAT ruling in many cases may be binding. And in the Smith-Salvage case, which is after a long judicial process led by Rogers Capital Tax, confirmed that the taxpayer who believe that they are being wrongly charged VAT by a supplier, relying on an MRA ruling, they still have the legal recourse. They can still fight it. And however, there is the new legislative proposed amendment to override that decision now, potentially, so you don't have such a recourse anymore if you are not agreeable with an MRA VAT ruling. So is it like procedurally unconstitutional in that case for you?
I decline to comment. Actually, they've done it in 4 places in this budget. There's the Alteo case, there's a Smith-Salvage case, there's an étude équivalent VAT case where they're basically denying the destination principle, and there's the VAT reverse charge on banks, which effectively is a tax on turnover because banks generally can't recoup their
They will have to
tax.
take it out of their pockets.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So again, I think we have to be very careful about putting tax measures where we are overall harming the jurisdiction.
Of course. Of course.
That's all I say for now.
We just need to put the point across, of course.
Otherwise, we'll see you guys on the screen at the Privy Council next year for the Alteo case.
Of course. I think we have just 2 questions. We will just, if Faraz can talk a little bit about the ICT sector before we end with Sanjay, because the national budget has talked a lot about innovation, and I wanted to end with that, about the blueprint for the ICT sector, building capacity for big data. And so we are talking about it enhancing productivity, promoting Mauritius as an ICT hub. And I think we have talked lengthily as well about whether that will be effective and how long that will take. So some brief comments from you.
Very brief. I think Sanjay mentioned it.
Yes.
I think we are trying to get in the bandwagon of the entire AI scheme of things. So it's not just about the ICT sector, because you've seen that the budget talks about empowering the FSC, for instance, to use AI in their licensing purposes. So I think it's something important to incorporate AI. I think it's also important that Mauritius as a jurisdiction is ready to adapt as much as we can globally when all the big nations are going towards AI, and it's very important to get at least a fair chunk of it in Mauritius. So it will, of course, enhance the competitiveness of the ICT sector. I believe the ICT sector can do more than what they are doing now, but I also think that they are quite sophisticated in the services they provide to the international community. But at the same time, the financial services also can join the bandwagon, whether it is fintech, virtual assets. Yeah. I think it's very important because it is reshaping the entire way of operations globally, and it is important that Mauritius is AI ready as well.
Of course.
Be it from a financial services point of view. So briefly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have talked lengthily as well.
If I may add to what Farah said, I think the blueprint has been very nicely crafted with the right priorities, etc. And the good thing is that the minister came up with his plan early in his mandate, and that would theoretically give him sufficient time for execution and adjustments where needed. Whereas in the past we've seen the formulation of strategic plans taking years with no real sort of implementation. Beyond, sophisticated things like AI, blockchain, and others, which, by the way, relate to software engineering at the end of the day. I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that all of this is enabled through skilled resources. Hence the urgency to really attract those people who will make a difference. So, if you ask me, the single most critical factor in terms of the long-term economic development of Mauritius is around the availability of skilled resources.
Yes.
So I think there's a sense of urgency on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, definitely. And I will come to Sanjay for some ending remarks on how do you see the future. And I think we have talked lengthily as well, and Kabir has mentioned that when we talk about the aim of the government for the debt ratio, I think it is 3 years is ambitious. So maybe some ending remarks, Sanjay, before we finish?
I think we have to be realistic. I think it's not a budget that will transform the Mauritian economy. It's not a budget that will bring a revolution in the country. I think it was important to set the foundation, to build a good base on which we can then project ourselves. I think this year, 2024, the country grew at 4.7%. And I think the forecast is 3 to 4% for the medium term. So it's not a lot of growth, but to be able to make that possible, there are certain constraints in Mauritius. And I think Kabir mentioned one of them, the skill. I think first of all, and I've not seen, maybe it will come afterwards, the supply of labor remains a big problem. And I think whether we're talking about the financial services sector, which you are operating in, or any other sector in Mauritius, we have a big problem in terms of labor. Then comes the skill requirements and the skill mismatch in terms of those sectors which are emerging and those sectors which are doomed to phase out. I think there's also like the brain drain. Yes. Now we're not talking only about the brain drain, we're also talking about family drain. Yeah. So it's not only young people moving out of Mauritius, but the whole family moving out of Mauritius. So what should be done? There's also like the lack of digitalization, lack of, broadly we can say public sector inefficiency and the ease of doing business. Yes. I think these are issues that the government would need to address. Yes. I think it was important for them to fix the foundation, to come up out of this of what happened for the last 10 years. And I think, as I said at the beginning, it was important to take bold and courageous measures. I think the elephant in the room is what we have not talked about, the pension, about the new pension scheme where now it's going to be paid only when people will reach 65 years.
65,
Okay?
yes.
I think we have to be realistic. There would be people who would be mécontents, who will not be happy with this budget. But we also have to think in terms, can we or should we continue with what happened during the last past 10 years? I think as an economist, and any economist, and Manisha said it, we have been harping, the word you use, saying that this model is not sustainable.
Yeah.
We just can't give freebies. We need to improve production. And I think maybe the government is moving in the right direction. It is the first steps. It's the first budget.
Yeah.
We hope that the government will continue the reform agenda because the pension is a big, big issue. The other one is the CSG.
Yeah.
Because CSG is in deficit. It replaces the national pension fund.
Which they will be
we're not sure
reviewing.
when we reach retirement whether we're going to get any kind of public pension.
Yeah.
The question will be, do we need it? But still, I mean, we
A lot of
have
people
to
would
ask
need it,
question
yeah.
about the
Yeah.
sustainability of that. And I think the key words of what we heard today was like temporary provisions. We talk about, there was also words of transition, all these allocation, we have a transition period. I think what is important, the government needs to do two things. One is to look after those who are vulnerable, those who need the support. Second, the government needs to communicate because there would be people who will be unhappy. But I think finally, we all have to be solidaire. We have to participate, and we have to play our part in building a new Mauritius. We have to play our part in the bridge to the new future.
Okay. I will echo with you on that. I think for a newly elected government, this is certainly a foundation that they have laid. What remains to be seen is, in fact, the implementation now. Hopefully, they will be able to do more. They will be able to come with more measures for a more resilient economy. We will have to wait and see. And we will have to wait for the finance bill to be able to get even more clarifications on the measures. But I think even further than the finance bill, it will be all the projects, everything that they will be driving, and all the people who will be working on the blueprint, etc. All these will have to be, we will have to see. And hopefully we will come for another panel discussion next year for the next national budget on a more optimistic note and with a brighter economic outlook, right? So this is the end of the panel for today. I thank you, all the panelists, for being here, for accepting our invitation and coming here, for all your insights. Thank you so much. And thank you for all our viewers as well. Thank you for staying until the end. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments with your contact details and we will contact you. Thank you, everyone.